For me, if I'm going to choose an X factor, I'm going to go to that kicking game. Obviously, we have a new kicker. That's going to be super important this week because I feel like it's going to be such a close game. If this game's going to be decided by 3 points or less, it's going to come down to who can make that field goal, whether it be towards the beginning of the game or at the very end of the game to win it.
And Brandon McManus, the newest Packer, comes on.
And that is how you pour another Packers podcast. All right, so real quick before we get started, again, go ahead and click that like, hit that subscribe button, comment down below. We're doing the giveaway. 1,000 subscribers gets the canvas, 2,500 gets a jersey of their choice, and 5,000 subscribers by the end of the season will get themselves some tickets to an NFL football game. Christian, you have the victory shade on. This is becoming a reoccurring theme, and I'm not going to say I don't like it.
Yeah.
But I do like to see, I like seeing your eyes.
Well, last week I made an executive decision. I decided to leave them on the entire time we were recapping the win against the Cardinals. So, we Packers got a win against the Texans. So, victory shades stay on as we recap Week 7.
What is the most common thing that we talk about as of late on this podcast outside of your victory shades?
Kickers.
Yeah, kickers.
Yeah.
And we saw it in the intro. You got dicey with your predictions, your keys to victory. I mean, maybe it was a shot in the dark, but God damn it, were you spot on accurate on what the key to the victory was? And we spend a lot of time on this very boring topic, but Sunday proved more than ever before.
It wasn't boring on Sunday.
As much as we hate talking about it, it just proves that if you do not have a kicker, you will not win some of these highly contested, close games in the NFL. And Brandon McManus comes up big, game-winning field goal, first game starting with Green Bay. Thoughts, reactions? What was your? Were you confident he was going to make it? Did you have confidence he was going to go out there and make it, or were you still living the old Narbison dream bug?
It was a roller coaster of emotions. My wife is probably the only one that can attest to how stressed out I actually was. The kids were still napping, so it was just me and her in the living room. I was standing, pacing back and forth. I had more faith that McManus would make it than I would have if Narbison was out there, but I still was stressed to the max. That entire game, we talked about last week, the Cardinals game was probably the most stress-free Packers game so far this year. Kind of just, started out fast, took the lead right away, held on to it, played well throughout the entire game. This last week against the Texans was the complete opposite. I was stressed and pulling my hair out for majority of the game. So if we could just find even somewhere in the middle, that'd be really great. Obviously, we prefer the stress-free games, but, you want them to be fun as well. You want them to be competitive, fun to watch. So somewhere in the middle, somewhere in between these last 2 weeks would be great.
Yeah, we knew going into last week that it was not going to be a relaxing game, that there would be moments where you would want to pull your hair out, that there would be maybe some yelling and shouting. And I reached out to you probably, I don't know, halfway through the game. I don't know exactly where we were, but it felt like for the longest time in that game, we were our own worst enemy. Packers lose the turnover battle 3-0. The defense doesn't get a takeaway for the first time this season. We lose the time of possession. We had 8 penalties for 55 yards. And on the flip side of it, we gave up the ball twice on the 11-yard line. Houston goes to score a field goal and a touchdown. But outside of that, Houston didn't really have a whole lot of momentum or was able to get a whole lot of traction going. But it seemed like consistently we were getting in our own way. And had we not maybe had a muff punch or an interception, down there near the red zone, this game probably becomes, like you were alluding to, maybe a less stressful game, maybe more of a beatdown. But Packers could not get out of their own way.
Yeah, it was really the defense kept the Packers in that game. The defense played phenomenally. They held CJ Stroud to very minimal passing yards. I believe I saw not a single Texans receiver had more than 30 yards receiving. Obviously, the defense didn't have an answer for Joe Mixon, and that's where the Texans' momentum and their scoring came from. But outside of that, if it wasn't for the way the Packers defense played, it wouldn't have been a contest. Packers would have been way behind and would have definitely lost that game without the way the defense played. The offense the offense was on and off, but for the majority of, in the middle of that game, they played well towards the beginning. Obviously, they played well towards the end, but in the middle of that game, the offense was so stale. Love made some poor decisions. It was frustrating. It was stressful every single drive, and giving the ball away, and Texans have a short field. Like every single time that happened, I was like, here we go. They're going to take advantage of this. They're going to go ahead, and then, and then it's halftime and they get the ball again. And it just was frustrating. So the fact that the defense held them in it and ultimately won that game for them, outside of Brandon McManus kicking a game-winning field goal, obviously that won it. But the defense was the whole reason Packers win this game.
Yeah, there's just so much to unpack from this game. I do want to start with, okay, so this is the type of game that the Packers lose last season consistently. They shot themselves in the foot too many times, lose the turnover battle, yada, yada. These are the early team struggles that we saw halfway through last year that resulted in losses where you're losing by a couple of points instead of finding a way to gut it up and get a victory. So the fact that they're able to do this, week 7 of the NFL season, and we're starting to see this team continue, but they still haven't peaked. I'm a firm believer that this team still hasn't peaked. But the fact that they're showing these signs very early on in the year gives a lot of promise for where this team can go. And some of the adversity that they're able to overcome early on is only going to benefit them later on in the season. But we look at that. Let's start with the defense. So CJ Stroud went 10 for 21, had 86 passing yards in the game. They kept him under 100 passing yards. 5 of those receptions went to Stefon Diggs, and he only finished the game with 23 total yards. You're right. Dalton Schultz is the leading receiver with 28 off of 1 reception, and the rest is just peanuts compared to the rest of it. So the Packers were able to get pressure on the pass rush, which has been something that's been lacking. We got to see Rashawn Gary get to the quarterback a couple times. He finished the game, I believe, with 2 sacks, had a quarterback pressure as well. But this Jeff Hafley defense is really starting to figure out how to disguise themselves. They got 7, 8 guys up there on the line at any given time, and you have no idea until that ball snaps who's dropping back into coverage and who's coming around and flying around at the quarterback. Very impressive stuff what they're doing there. And then I do want to call out a specific player. Quay Walker goes out. Eric Wilson comes up off of the bench, puts on the microphone and everything. I will admit, I was not privy on my Eric Wilson knowledge up to Sunday, but he was all over the field 24/7 once he got out there. And he finished the game with 8 total tackles, second highest in the team in tackles, 6 solo tackles, 2 sacks. Monster. This is the kind of depth that you want. Outstanding performance from Eric Wilson.
Yeah, he came out of nowhere. I mean, I think you and I were texting during the game, like, who is this guy? Where did he come from? Don't even know. Didn't even know he was on the roster. So yeah, like you said, depth is key. So when your top guys go out, to have a guy like that, an unknown guy like that, come in and take care of business, that's what makes a good football team, right? You can't lose a player to injury and then your defense falls apart. And to your point about this Hafley defense, the wrinkles that he throws, the blitzes, I saw a clip. It was a drive, probably was when Texans had a short field. They were fairly close to the goal line. and Packers ended up holding them to a field goal because they got a sack on a third down play. Well, I rewatched that clip, and there was a comment on it that said, "This is how you mess up pass protection every single time." Right before the ball is snapped, Rashawn Gary gets up from the edge where he's always coming from, walks over to right over the center, and he's kind of just hanging out there. And then the ball snapped, and he's rushing the quarterback from right there. These are things that it's unconventional, but obviously stuff like that works, and it made a huge difference in this game.
On the offensive side of the ball, like you had mentioned, a little bit of a tale of two stories. Is that even a tale of two? What's it saying?
It's a tale of two cities. Yep. It's a tale of two cities. In this situation, you could say it's a tale of two offenses.
It is. So the Packers had 5 drives that went 3 and out on Sunday. And it's either feast or famine at times with this offense in particular, where they're either moving the ball, things are going good, or they can't seem to even pick up a first down. Jordan Love, again, still seeing some really weird decision-making on his end of the football. He's made some beautiful passes. That touchdown pass to Tucker Kraft is one for the ages. It's just like we saw the previous week with the throw over the defender to Christian Watson on that big 4th down play. He can thread the needle, but you almost have to ask yourself, does he have to continually try to rely on his talent, rely on his arm, or is this offense talented enough around him where he can find the check down or find the other options? That's something that we don't have an answer to this early on in the season, this early on in his career and his, just as a Packer. It's a little bit frustrating for sure. He's shooting himself in the foot. Those 2 turnovers, though, specifically, like I've alluded to before, the Packers really run away with this game. Jordan Love's able to hang on to the ball or not turn over the football. I don't know. I have mixed thoughts on what to ultimately think. He willed his way to a great end of the game drive and got the Packers in field goal position for McManus. But you're not always going to get these get out of jail free cards, and he's got a lot of growing to do here, typically against the Jacksonville Jaguars with the Detroit Lions 2 weeks away.
Yeah. It is a little frustrating. We had week 6 against the Cardinals where we were very happy with the way Jordan Love played, the way he stuck with the high percentage throws, the way he made better decisions, didn't throw it into double or triple coverage when it was unnecessary. So it was definitely frustrating to see a little bit of that come back. I did notice, so if there was a situation where he did make a poor decision on a throw and it didn't get picked, it was very close to getting picked or something like that, or wasn't quite as catastrophic as it could have been, the very next play, he'd come back and kind of collect himself and make a much better decision the next play. So I guess that's good to see that he's kind of realizing, oh, that was probably not the smartest throw to make. Let's rein it back in and stick with those high percentage throws. Like you said, there were still plays where he made unbelievable throws. I pegged that Kraft touchdown throw as well as incredible. Not many quarterbacks can make that throw. So it's so difficult to be frustrated and say, what is he doing? Why is he making those types of decisions? And then you see an incredible throw like that. And he's like, oh, that's why we paid him all the money. That's why we know that he can be one of the top quarterbacks in the league. So it's all season long. It's been really back and forth with Jordan Love. And it's a little frustrating because we hoped that this season would be a huge step forward after the way last season ended. But again, to your point, he's early in his career. He's still learning a lot. He's a young guy. So it's just a matter of him continuing to take steps forward. I think this last week was maybe not a step forward from week 6, because I think he took a big step forward in week 6. This may not have been a step forward. I don't know that it's necessarily a step back either. I think he kind of just needs to work towards making a much bigger step forward next week against the Jaguars.
Oh, and he's still one of the, he's proven or shown that he is one of the top 5, arguably top 5 quarterbacks in the league. Like I feel confident and I still feel comfortable. I haven't lost all doubt in the guy where he's backing up and ready to throw a zinger, right? used to have that with Favre. And I caution saying that because there's been a lot of Favre comparisons. I brought it up a few weeks ago on this podcast too. I don't want to go down that avenue by any stretch of the imagination, but I still have confidence. Like, I guess what I'm getting at is when Rodgers would drop back, especially when he was like in his prime, we're talking like the 2014, really to 2020, 2021. He dropped back and he's about to throw a bomb. You're like, oh, something good is about to happen. Only about like 90% of the time, you're like, okay, it's going to be good. I don't have that worry yet with Jordan Love, but it's just seems like it's coming in such weird moments of the game. It's not necessarily a huge third down where you got to pick up a bunch of yards. It's like a either first or second down where it's like, what are you doing? Get to the next play. Just throw it away, do what you can, get to the next play and keep the drive alive. And that's kind of the evolution that we're just going to continue to monitor. And shit, if you have a defense that plays as well as they've been playing, you can get away with making some mistakes throughout the game.
Right.
And still find some success throughout the season. So,
yeah, Packers lost
to 5-2.
Packers lost the turnover battle, right?
Yeah,
they lost the turnover battle and still ended up winning the game. That doesn't happen very often, obviously. So that defense is, again, that's what I started out with this episode. The defense won that game for the Packers, ultimately.
Yeah, I wish I would have wrote it down. Watching Matt LaFleur's press conference on Monday, one of the reporters brought up teams that have lost the turnover differential by 3 or more. That record is 90 wins to like 1,100 losses and 3 ties. It doesn't happen at all. So kudos to them for going through the growing pains. Glad we got the win. You're going to learn from your mistakes, get better. That was a big win to definitely secure because the NFC North and around the NFC North continues to be very tough. There's not a lot of opportunity for mistakes. And I'm not even talking about winning the division. I'm just talking about trying to find a playoff seed. This early on the season, it's a very tight and competitive division and a conference. Did you have any luck figuring out why Jaire Alexander and Stefon Diggs hate each other so much?
Yeah, I did look into it a little bit because it was pretty intense pregame this week. It was fun to watch, but I didn't really expect it. And so I did dig into the Jaire Alexander, Stefon Diggs feud that they've had going on the last couple of years. And really, it really started, I believe it was last year. Packers had a matchup against the Buffalo Bills where Stefon Diggs was previously last season. And the Packers team was coming out of the tunnel and Stefon Diggs happened to be coming out of the tunnel at the same time and started jaw-jacking with Jaire, knowing that they'd likely be matched up in certain situations. Part of the reason why he did that was because they kind of know each other from back when Diggs was with the Minnesota Vikings. They faced each other twice a year for 2 seasons. So the two guys know each other well, but really the feud and the pushing and shoving and the getting in each other's faces, that really started last season with Diggs kind of starting it coming out of the tunnel. And it just was a continuation. I don't know that there's truly I don't know that there's truly hate between the two of them or anything. I think it's just the two of them trying to get each other riled up, get in each other's heads. And I mean, ultimately, Jaire Alexander won the battle this last week. I mean, Diggs only had, what'd you say, 23 yards receiving?
23.
It was
up on 5 receptions.
I mean, he was irrelevant. That's the word I'm looking for. Diggs was irrelevant this week. So, and that hasn't happened in past matchups. Diggs has played well against the Packers in the past when he was with the Vikings. But yeah, I think it'll continue. The next time we see these two teams match up, it'll happen again. I think it'll be a ongoing thing. But yeah, there's really not a whole lot to it.
You don't think that there's more of a brooding or brewing like hatred or like animosity towards these two?
I don't think so. I mean, they maybe don't like each other necessarily, but I don't think that they're, I really think that
they like each other at all.
Well, yeah, that's evident that they don't like each other, but I don't think that they would. I don't know. I don't know what I'm
So
trying to say.
Jaire is, I mean, he's always been the same person since he entered the league. Just he'd get, I remember like plays he'd get up and he'd peacock off or he'd gritty away from Jefferson. Like the guy definitely plays mind games for sure. But I do think that this Diggs thing goes maybe a layer deeper for whatever reason. You mentioned the time in Minnesota that they would go up against each other. The Buffalo thing, I saw the same thing. Xavier McKinney had an interesting quote post game that said, "I'm with 23 every time. If he don't like him, then I don't like him." That's what it is. So a couple things to unpack from there. I love that. I mean, Xavier McKinney and Jaire Alexander have a great, these guys are just bros. They remind me almost of like the Preston Smith to Darius Smith romance that we had in that defense a couple of years back when there was the Bash brothers and they had each other's backs and go, you just love having it in their secondary. But, you know, for McKinney to come out there and comment like he did, there's something definitely brewing underneath it. I wish I could have the breaking news and insight. I scoured the internet as well. I was interested to see what you found. It sounds like you found the exact same information. Whatever reason, they don't like each other. But that scuffle at the beginning of the game was awesome. I love that sort of stuff. I was watching the game with an older group of people, and they don't like that stuff at all. They're like, "Oh, just play the game," and I'm like, "No, this is awesome. Mind games. Just play the mind games. Get in there and just mess with them." And who knows?
Really, it wasn't Jaire that was getting into the scuffle, wasn't it? It was Nixon, because Diggs had come over and started talking smack to Jaire, I believe, and then Nixon stepped in.
It.
You think? Okay, I guess I think
he caught a pass. I think he caught a pass right next to him, and then jumped, was kind of leaned forward and started talking smack, and then the rest of it ensued. And then every time he started to walk away, the rest of the Green Bay team,
it was Diggs against the entire Packers roster. Yeah.
What else from the Houston game do you want to discuss before we move on to the Jacksonville Jaguars?
Romeo Dobbs, he had the hot hand this week. He had 8 receptions for 94 yards, I believe. Didn't catch a touchdown pass, but I believe he led the team in receiving. And he's had 2 good weeks in a row, obviously. And one thing that I specifically noticed was his body language was a lot better this week. We talked about his situation last week, and even after those touchdowns that he scored, his body language, he just still seemed off. He seemed a lot more like himself this week. There was one specific catch across the middle where he gets up, and he didn't do any celebration dance or anything, but he stood up and was trying to give this, this tough look on his face. Like, yeah, I'm back. I'm here. So that was good to see. Good to see Dobbs get back to himself a little bit, and still, again, a second week in a row, lead the team in receiving.
8 receptions, 94 yards, as you mentioned, no touchdowns. But again, I've said it before for anyone that's watching for the first time. I'm convinced, Reed, who is the playmaker, had a pretty quiet game on Sunday. He has that tendency, but when it comes to Dobbs, he has filled in that role of, dare I say, Devontae Adams and Jordy Nelson, where we thought on the last drive, if you need a pickup, if you need to pick up a first down, the completion of some sort, throw it his direction, and there's a high percentage that he's going to come down with the ball. And he seemed locked in more than ever on Sunday, and I think that's a nasty formula moving forward if he's going to be that locked in for the rest of the year.
And we're not going to see it. That's not the Dobbs coming back to himself these last couple of weeks does not mean Jaden Reed takes a step back. Just like we talked about beginning of the season, it's probably going to be a different guy. It could be a different guy each week. So it's a dangerous offense. That's for sure.
Dangerous offense. Anybody else you want to pinpoint? Because I want to give a little bit of love to the kicker, the punter. That is not the kicker, the punter. My boy Dan Whalen continues. I love talking special teams. Apparently, it must be the fades that I'm going through. He had 5 punts, averaging 56.8 yards and a net of 51.2 yards.
Insane. Insane.
Game changer.
Yeah.
Yes. I mean, that ability to flip the field is so crucial, not only in the game against, like we had on Sunday against the Texans, but moving forward. If your offense is pinned deep or they're not getting any traction, just flip the course of the field. And then I will give him kudos as well to getting that snap on that game-winning field goal. That was not a great snap. He's able to corral that ball, get it down, laces out ankle.
That had me so scared. I saw it. I saw it happen. I was like, oh, bad snap. Oh, bad hold. Oh, no. Oh, no. I was so scared.
The first one was so good. It was so clean. The whole operation was perfect. And then, that snap happened. Like, oh, no. It's just time slowed down for a second. I do want to say, taking it back to the kicker real quick, his post-game interview was pretty interesting where they asked him, how many game-winning field goals have you had in your career? And he's like, I don't know, probably like 8 to 10. I kind of lose track after a while. I'm like, okay, settle down a little bit. And then he also brought up a point too. He's like, I always like to get that practice kick off. Like, I can get that first kick, and it goes, wide left, wide right. I never missed twice in a row. So you get this guy in here who's got confidence. I think he's looking at a second chance and, at his career in the NFL. He's on a team that is ascending. It's Super Bowl contender type of team. We figured out our kicking. We figured out our punting, and now our defense is clicking. The offense needs get some consistency, and if we can beat up on these Jags and put a full game together again, I think that Detroit game's going to become very interesting in 2 weeks.
Yeah. Oh, and McManus got a Lambeau leap out of it.
Well, there's a little Lambeau crawl up the side of the.
Yeah. Did you see the thing about the guy so McManus didn't quite make it up the wall, and the fan kind of pulled him up into the stands? Well, did you see the thing that was the same exact fan that completely denied Joe Mixon when he tried to do a Lambeau leap? Just so ironic that he denies the opposing team player and then ends up being the guy to yank up McManus after a game-winning field goal. It was a once in a lifetime experience for that fan.
I heard too that same fan got removed from his seats because of what he did to Mixon.
Oh, really?
They weren't the same spot. They were 2 separate areas. So there might be some validity to that. But yeah, I did see that same guy. All right. Well, 30 minutes. I knew we were going to spend a heavy topic or a heavy amount of time talking about the Houston Texans matchup. Because this is a big game. It was an opportunity for the Packers to finally beat an opponent the first time this season and maybe solidify, that they are one of the better teams in the league. I'm sure we'll get into our thoughts on power rankings and all that stuff later on in overtime. But we have to look to Jacksonville Jaguars. And this is a game that heading into, I'm looking at our preseason predictions of every week by weeks that we went through. This is the game that I circled as a trap game. The Packers do not travel to Jacksonville very well. The last time, in fact, that they played in the stadium, they lost 38-3 to the New Orleans Saints. That whole location was moved over to that stadium. I think it was the season opener. Rodgers and company just got absolutely destroyed. It doesn't really factor in whatsoever, but I never like heading to the coast, like California, and I hate California, and I hate Florida. For whatever reason, Packers just don't play well there. But here we are facing off against the 2-5 Jacksonville Jaguars. This should be a game that the Packers take care of business. I don't want to get ahead of myself too much, but they're 4.5-point favorites. Jacksonville has not played very well up to this point this season. If you're looking at the teams that they beat, the Indianapolis Colts, they beat by 3 points. And then the Patriots on Sunday over in London, they destroyed on the Patriots 32-16. But they've lost games to the Dolphins, Tua and the Dolphins. That was week 1. They've lost to the Browns. They've lost to the Bills, the Texans, and they've lost to Caleb Williams and the Bears. Trevor Lawrence, $55 million a year quarterback, getting paid the same amount of money as Jordan Love. Not off to a very hot start this season. His stats are, he has 1,500 yards passing, 9 touchdowns, 3 interceptions. Are we worried about this team? Should we? Is this a trap game situation?
Yeah, I think it definitely is a trap game situation. I'm not necessarily worried about the Jacksonville Jaguars. I mean, they've played pretty poorly so far this season. You're right. The Packers definitely should take care of business this game, but it's also a game that this young Packers team could easily look past, just kind of in their own minds, chalk it up as a win and not show up to Jacksonville. So it's got to be the same mindset week in and week out. They got to take care of business with each team that they're facing, each opponent, no matter what the opponent's record. So it's going to be about focused. Matt LaFleur, I think, is a phenomenal coach at trying to get his team to focus on that and not look past games, but it still happens. This is a young Packers team. It's easy for these young guys to be like, they're 2-5. We got this in the bag. No problem. We just beat the Texans, who are one of the top teams in the league. We got this one in the bag. So they can't go in with that mindset, especially with the Jaguars being coming off of a pretty big win this last week. They put up a bunch of points, pretty much dominated that entire game. So Jaguars are coming in on a high. So Packers can't come in and just look past them.
Yeah, on Sunday, Trevor Lawrence went 15 for 20, 193 yards, 1 touchdown, finished with a quarterback rating of 95. Bigsby, the running back, had 118-yard rushing, 118-yard rushing and 2 touchdowns. So he's probably the main focal point. There are receivers. Christian Kirk is the name that stands out to me on that receiving core, but he's not necessarily their best or top receiver on that roster. On the offensive side of the ball, we're probably looking at, the Packers need to be able to stop the run. And with what Joe Mixon did to him on Sunday, that's definitely an area of concern that, okay, we got to clean this up. I was surprised to see that the Packers were actually ranked 9th in yards per carry on defense at 4.3. They're only giving up 40.3 yards per carry, but it still is, on that defensive side, it's been a concern for a number of years. It would be really nice to get Devontae Wyatt back, because I think that defensive line is severely missing his presence and helping stop the run. Do you have any major concerns or any headlines on their offense? Nothing really stands out to me as outside of maybe Bigsby being able to get some momentum. If they hone down on him, can this offense do anything else?
So I think the Jaguars do have quite a few offensive weapons that the Packers need to be concerned about and need to focus on. So Trevor Lawrence, obviously you gave his stats. He hasn't really panned out to be the quarterback that everyone expected him to be. He had huge success in college at Clemson. Obviously, yes, got paid a lot of money, but he hasn't really panned out to be that generational talent that they expected. He's still a decent quarterback, though, and the weapons that he has around him. So you mentioned Tank Bigsby. Tank Bigsby is actually the backup. So Travis Etienne was injured last week, did not play. Bigsby is the backup, and Bigsby is a rookie. He came in this season kind of looking to make a name for himself and maybe steal some touches from Etienne, but it was pretty solidly Etienne's backfield. Obviously, with Etienne's injury, that's got to be monitored. We don't know for sure if he's going to be playing this week or not. I don't think it matters which one of them ends up being the starter, Etienne or Bigsby. I think both of them are good running backs, and the Packers got to stop the run. We saw it against Mixon. We've seen it numerous times throughout the season. Running backs kind of tear apart this Packers defense. It's got to be a focal point, stopping the run. Stop the run, force Trevor Lawrence to throw the ball to this phenomenal Packers secondary. Other pieces that this offense has. So you mentioned Christian Kirk. Last season, Kirk was kind of the number one guy for Trevor Lawrence. This year, that's kind of changed. They have another rookie, Brian Thomas Jr., who has kind of emerged as their top wide receiver. He's a big, deep threat. The last few weeks, he's had some big explosive plays and has kind of established himself pretty much as the wide receiver one on this team now. So you got Brian Thomas Jr., you got Christian Kirk, who is also still a good player, and then Gabe Davis. Gabe Davis came over from the Buffalo Bills this season, and he's been injured a couple times this year. He was back last week, didn't do a ton, but he's a threat as well. And then the last piece of this offense that we haven't seen week in and week out, but he was back this past week, is Evan Ingram. Evan Ingram, the tight end, came over from the New York Giants. And early on this season, Ingram had kind of been the number one target for Trevor Lawrence. And he came back from injury this past week and worked right back into that role. Him and Brian Thomas Jr. both had 5 targets and 5 receptions in their big win against the Patriots. So I really do think that this offense has a lot of weapons that the Packers are going to have to account for. It's just a matter of how Trevor Lawrence performs and how this offense performs, because they haven't been consistent throughout this season so far.
To your point, Brian Thomas Jr. has 5 more receptions than Christian Kirk, but he has nearly 200 more yards receiving. So that deep threat is definitely going to be the case when it comes to him. When we move over to the defensive side of the ball, defense is not very good. This should be a game. I'm knocking on wood. I wonder if the microphone will pick that up, but this should be a game that Jordan Love can really start to build some momentum and not force the ball and get turnovers that drive us crazy. Their defense is 32nd in blitz rate. They're 25th in sack percentage. They're tied 29th in takeaways this season. They're 30th in scoring defense, and they're 32nd in the defensive pass EPA/dropback. So the defense is vulnerable, to say the least. Hopefully, we can see a couple of different things out of this offense, the Packers offense, that is. We need to get the running game going. Josh Jacobs, we talked about this the last couple of weeks, seemed like he was really running into a wall a lot on Sunday once again. He had maybe 1 or 2 where he broke and got 12, 13 yards, but nothing too crazy out of this running back group so far.
He still had 76-yard rushing, though.
That's because they're feeding him the ball, though, as much as they are. So he's chipping up, these 3-yard carries, but he's not getting those 160-yard rushing games like we would see him get when he was with the Vegas Raiders, right?
You're not seeing explosive runs out of him as much as we would like.
But then, as far as the rest of the offense goes, like I said, Jordan Love, this is a game that he has to really just hone in and get comfortable. I don't want to call it a practice game necessarily, but it almost has that sense to it. We are going against a mediocre, if not very poor defense, and it's time to kind of get this humming on the offensive side of the football.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I agree. As far as the Jags defense goes, I believe Rotoballer had them ranked 31st in the league this week. On average, they're allowing 27.7 points a game. So allowing teams to put up a lot of points on them. To your point about Jordan Love's ability to really carve this defense up and get back into a groove. So the Jags defense has allowed on average 376 yards total per game, rushing and passing, but they've also allowed 23 touchdowns, 16 of them being passing touchdowns. Way more passing touchdowns allowed than rushing touchdowns. So yeah, definitely a game where Jordan Love can eat and carve this defense up.
All right, so I'm going to give you the key to victory or X factor first this week. I don't want to steal your thunder. You said something earlier that made me think you might steal my thunder. Just part of the reason why I want you to go first. Do you even have yours together? You're looking like you haven't.
I don't. As you were talking, as you were going through, the Jags defense and talking about Josh Jacobs in the rushing game, I was racking my brain. I was like, oh, what am I going to choose as my X factor this week?
I can go first. I'll go first. I'll give you a little bit more time to think about it.
If you got one ready, you don't have to worry about me stealing yours because I'm not prepared.
All right. For me, my X factor in this game is going to go to Matt LaFleur. And you alluded to it before in some of your comments. This is a head coach that needs to get this team wrapped around on the week in front of them. I'm talking about trap game. It's not just the fact that the game is 5 days away from when we're recording this. I thought about it when we looked early on with schedule and how everything was shaking out. Got a big matchup against Detroit in 2 weeks. Matt LaFleur has got to make sure that this team who is traveling is mentally prepared to go out there and put a football game together. I think there are a lot of things that work in their favor right now. The fact that the division is as tough as it is, the Packers can afford to slip backwards at any point. They've already given up 2 losses on the season. So I think it should help in a lot of cases that they can't just, walk in here and expect to take away a victory. I think that the team knows that every game this season, quite frankly, it's going to matter moving forward. But it's going to boil down to Matt. It's what he's doing in preparation this week. Not necessarily the game plan that he puts together, as much as it is just making sure everyone's locked in to play 60 minutes of football and get this team kind of humming in the right direction. If he can do that, if the Packers show up to play like they did on Sunday, like they did against the Cardinals, like they have the last couple weeks, the Packers will come away with, I would think, a very large victory. But it's just going to depend on, if they're half-assed in it for most of the game, or if they're truly there to hone their skills and get ready for that Detroit matchup. So that's my key to victory is Sir Matt LaFleur.
It's a good one. That's a real good one. That one wasn't even on my mind. So even if I would have went first, I wouldn't have stole your key to victory. But in listening to your key to victory, I kind of figured out what I want to choose for mine. We talked about the Packers offense, the advantage that they have as long as they show up to play, as long as Matt LaFleur has this team prepared. So I'm going to go the other side of the ball. I think a key to victory or a specific X factor player that I'm going to go with is Xavier McKinney. I think he gets back on this interception train. He hasn't had one in a couple weeks now, right? He needs to get back on that interception train. The defense in general, creating turnovers. We talked about the Jags offense and this new guy, Brian Thomas, new guy on the block, and his deep ball ability. I don't think that's going to work. I don't think that's going to work against this Packers secondary. I think they're going to attempt it, and Xavier McKinney is going to come flying across the field and take it away like we've seen him do multiple times this season. So that's my X factor this week is Xavier McKinney.
One of the things that I believe you pointed out last week was the deep ball in general is where McKinney thrives.
Mm-hmm.
And to your point, if that's their leading receiver and that's how they're getting the majority of their big plays, McKinney has fast makeup speed when it comes to getting across the field from sideline to sideline. So you were, spot on in your key to victory X factor last week. I hope you're right again. You might be going on a hot streak here.
On a streak? Yeah. The previous week, the week against the Cardinals, I got the Packers, just the Packers, not the Cardinal score, but in our score predictions, I got the Packers score exactly right. This last week, key to victory, got that right.
Well, let's see if you can put it all together. What do you have for your final score prediction heading into Sunday's game?
I didn't have this prepared yet either. But talking about the Jags defense allowing over 27 points per game, Packers have been putting up around that many points per game already. I think they put up more points this week. I'm gonna go Packers 35, Jags 20.
Yeah. You're kind of right there where I am as well with me thinking. And I almost want to do I'm not gonna, but you almost want to do 2 score predictions. It's okay, is Packers team A going to show up or is Packers team B going to show up? We've kind of like we did with is Love going to play or is Love not going to play? My original, when I was kind of getting ready to record this and thinking about it throughout the day, I was originally somewhere right around 21 to 10 type of game, just because I feel like it could be a little bit of an up and down roller coaster. But I'm with you. I think that the Packers put up 34 points. You're at 35. I like the Packers putting up 34 points. And I like the Jaguars being held under 20. So I'll give them 17, 34-17, maybe my final score.
You like that 17 number.
Yeah, I don't know if there's a Devontae Adams ghost that's living in my soul or not, but what's McManus's number? Is that 17? Who's 17 on the roster? I feel like one of those special teams guys is 17.
I don't know. I'm not sure. You think that think that bothers Devontae?
I don't care. I don't care if it bothers him. Let's get into who's wearing number 17. We'll talk about Devontae Adams for sure. We're going to talk about Tua potentially coming back this upcoming week. We got score predictions across the league. We got power ranking. Guys, kick it over to overtime. It will post if you're watching this on Thursday morning. It will post tonight at 10 p.m. Otherwise, until next time, we will see you guys on the internet. Thanks for watching.